Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great day. It's Corporal Speculation, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that I am very passionate about, that I don't think gets anywhere near enough coverage. And it's why, you've seen so many economic plans in the United States, specifically in our lifetime, that have just failed to create change and get the economy back on track. So let me ask you a quick question before we dive into why, but is this a story that you remember? Somebody comes up with a fantastic new piece of legislation. There's a ton of debate about it. Maybe it's your guy, maybe it's the other guy. The people on the opposite side say it's going to destroy America. Your guys say it's going to make everything 1,000 times better. But then nothing ever really seems to happen. The legislation passes and nothing changes. I'm here to explain why that happens. And of course, these things are multifaceted, but I'm going to try and keep it to a 12-minute video, so I won't be able to get super deep into different aspects. But I want to talk about one of the biggest issues that plagues the United States economy, and that's bad money. We just have terrible money. And to explain why, I want to go all the way back to the start. What are humans? Humans are primates, and we hunted and gathered. And then we did that for a long time until we figured out that we didn't need to hunt and gather. We could bring everything home and we could raise our own animals and we could have plants wherever we wanted them. And that's animal husbandry and the agricultural revolution, which were both fantastic for the human race. But as we started to develop more and more things, specialization in trade became a thing. Everybody can't do everything. It makes much more sense that we trade chickens for beef, and I just have all the chickens and you have all the cows, and we just trade back and forth, and I'm just the best at raising chickens and you're the best at raising cows. And I'm getting there. I know this is kind of a tangent, but I think it's important to lay this foundation so you understand why our economy is fundamentally unsound. But that was an economy, and we would trade. But there's a problem. There's a dilemma that comes up where, maybe I want some beef, but you don't want any eggs. So what we usually will do in that situation is come up with a stand-in good. That's a currency, So let's flash forward all the way till 2010, when I was in the Marine Corps and deployed to Afghanistan. You could trade anything for cigarettes. Even non-smokers would be happy to trade their M&Ms or their MREs or whatever for cigarettes, because cigarettes were a currency, and you could trade those cigarettes for anything else. And cigarettes made a fantastic currency while we were over there on the front line. We didn't have access to anything else for two reasons, and this is what you need to have a good currency. It is scarce, so there's a limited amount of it, and it has intrinsic value, right? So you can just light that cigarette and smoke it, and people love it, and it's really that simple. That's all you need to make a currency. Back in the day, they used whiskey a lot. But with any good, it becomes difficult to transport it, so that's why a lot of the time civilizations ended up landing on gold. But let's pop back to my cigarette example, right? Say you opened your MRE, you had some M&Ms, I wanted those M&Ms, I'll give you 4 cigarettes for them, and that's a good deal for you. But what if those cigarettes are wet? Well, now they're not valuable. They don't have that intrinsic value anymore, and they become worthless. It's no longer a good currency, And what if, the US government had dropped off 30 pallets of cigarettes, massive pallets up to my head, and there was all the cigarettes in the world? Is anybody going to want to trade M&Ms for a pack of cigarettes at that point? No, because there's unlimited right there. Why would I give you? There's no scarcity there, so it's no longer a good mode of trade. And that's kind of where we're at, is we came off the gold standard in the 1970s, really for World War II, and we started printing too much money. And every time we print money, is it basically we're bringing in more and more pallets of cigarettes, and the value of cigarettes as a trade commodity are going down. and inflation isn't everything getting more expensive, it's money getting less expensive, so the money has less value, so everything else is worth more based on it. And that's why we see this creeping inflation. There's a website called What Happened in 1971. I'll link to it in the description. But you can go through and you can see how just about every negative society impactor started to spike as soon as we came off the gold standard. And it makes sense, because what we're doing is fundamentally unsound. Our money is not scarce. There's unlimited of it. They printed $7 trillion for COVID, and that's why we have all this inflation. And it doesn't have an intrinsic value. It's not useful for anything. And fiat has been tried before in history. Look it up. It's never worked. It always goes like this. And unfortunately, it always ends up with a hyperinflation type situation, and then people walking away from that currency. So it kind of puts us in a tough spot where we've been on the wrong track for so long that people don't really know what right looks like, but there are some things, there's some promising developments on this front. Cryptocurrency is one of them. I'm not as married to that one, but there are some cool ones like ADA and Ethereum that you can program and make decentralized apps. And so then you have a scarce currency that also does have an intrinsic value, which hits both of them. Personally, I think gold has always worked really well. So golds or minerals, maybe you could use a basket of goods. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we tie it to something, but if you want to fix the American economy, one of the most important steps is you got to pin the dollar to something. Could be anything, honestly. You could do the Big Mac buck, every dollar is exchangeable for one cheeseburger, or $4 for one cheeseburger is where we're at now. If we had done that in, 2005 when I was in high school, that would mean that the value of an average cheeseburger has gone from $1 to $4. Our currency is depreciated by that amount. That's what that means. And we would have continued to have that value. But unfortunately, I think, as long as we don't have a pegged currency and we have this system where, the federal government can print as much money as they want through the Federal Reserve, and they have, unauditable ability to put that money into the economy however they want, which is what they do, that nobody can audit the Federal Reserve. And the heads are all bankers. So realistically speaking, they're probably just giving themselves that money. We're going to continue to see the value of everything increase against the dollar. And until you peg the dollar to something and say that you're trading something for something, we won't be able to get back on track from an economic perspective. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of it. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because if you go all the way back to what our system is based on, and that's the reason I laid that foundation, is that you give me beef and I give you eggs, right? We're trading something for something. That's the system that's always been, is you have to trade something for something. You can't trade something for nothing. And that's what we're doing, is we're trading something for nothing. And that's an unsustainable system. It breaks down. It has always broken down, and we're watching it break down, So, if you're ever finding yourself wondering, I don't know why the Affordable Health Care Act didn't bring costs down. If you're a liberal, maybe that's something that you scratch your head and wonder about. This is why, and if you find yourself wondering, I don't know why the big, beautiful bill, if you're a conservative, didn't bring inflation down like they said it would. It was never gonna, because you can't bring inflation down if you have a currency that's not pegged to something of intrinsic value. It's unintuitive. It makes no sense. You're trading your labor at work for a thing that the Federal Reserve can just pull out of nothing. We're trading something for nothing, and that's a system that always slowly breaks down. So that's just one that I wanted to cover really quick. I think not enough people talk about the gold standard, or, just having sound money. And it's so easy to underestimate how absolutely critical that is to having a well-run economy. So one of the first topics I wanted to cover, you guys will hear me talk about it again. When we talk about getting back to the founders' values and getting our country back on track to a place where we can have a good country and we can leave something better for our kids and our grandkids, I think something that absolutely has to be part of the conversation is how do we get back onto a sound money? So I'd love to hear from you guys, different things that you think might work, what we could peg the dollar to get off of fiat. I certainly don't think I have the only ideas. And like I said, I'm interested. I think this is a really interesting topic, and we got to figure it out. We got to figure out a way to make our money make sense again, or else the rest of it's going to burn. It's just going to go down on its own. There's nothing that could be done about it because you can't trade something for nothing. That's all I got. Guys, thanks so much. Leave me a like, a comment, throw me a sub. Have a great day.